Lisa, thank you so much for today. And can you tell our audience, what was your childhood like?
I had a very simple childhood. I'm Australian. I grew up in a small coastal town, very simple, about 90 minutes north of Sydney in Australia.
What were your ambitions as a child?
When I was very young, I wanted to be a hairdresser. And I'm actually not very good with my hands, and so I think it's a really good thing that I didn't pursue a career as a hairdresser.
How did you, at the very first beginning, get interested
Yep.
in law?
Yep.
From hairdresser
I know.
to law.
I did a lot of sort of science and maths when I was at school, and enjoyed that when I finished school. And so I had a gap year. And I went and sort of lived as an exchange student in Europe for a year. And during the course of that year, I realised that in addition to STEM type subjects, I also did enjoy humanities and using that side of my brain as well. So I ended up doing science and law combined.
Can you tell our audience a little bit more about your current role?
Today I work as a lawyer, as VP and Chief International Counsel at PayPal. Based here in Singapore, and I have the absolute privilege and honour of working with a team of about 70 around the world. My team is sort of dispersed in about 15 different locations because we're sort of a tech company as well as finance company. The pace is fairly fast and furious, and we sort of navigate legal issues and support the business in a way that in some cases hasn't been done before. So really, we work together supporting the business in navigating a very complex and sometimes ambiguous regulatory landscape across the world, which is a lot of fun.
And Lisa, as a female leader managing such a big team, 70 people in 15 countries, and what have been the main challenges you have faced?
Working in a virtual team is not easy. It's much easier to sort of walk next door to someone's office than it is to have to sort of figure out how to work with someone on a task or a challenge or an opportunity when they sit in a time zone which is 12 hours different to your own time zone. So how you coordinate and collaborate as a virtual team, I think, is a key challenge. I think the other piece I would call out, law is very much intertwined with culture in terms of how it's practiced, how it's enforced, how it sort of manifests in different societies all around the world. And sort of having an appreciation of the different cultural backgrounds that lawyers might be coming together to work on the same thing in, I think is very important in terms of supporting that empathy and understanding about how people's preferences for work manifest, how they sort of iterate around issues, the approach they'll take to risk.
And Lisa, you're one of a growing number of women in a largely male-dominated field. What was it like when you just started out? I
think that if you've got a vision about what you would like to achieve, or a sort of a sense of purpose, and you demonstrate the value that you bring to situations, if you have that focus, and that's what's motivating you, then you'll be listened to, and you'll be able to sort of achieve some of your dreams and develop as a person. I will say, like, particularly early in my career, if I found myself in a situation where I was, obviously, the minority or the only female in a meeting, it definitely was something noteworthy to me. Like, I observed those differences, but I'd like to think not in an abrasive way, but I certainly didn't allow those differences to create bad tapes playing in my head, sort of along the lines of, oh, there's no other women here, I shouldn't be here, or this is not the right place for me, or I don't belong here, or any of those sort of messages, even on a subliminal basis. I certainly didn't allow that to take effect, or didn't feel that way when I was in those situations. And sometimes if you're a minority, that's an advantage. in a way, right? Like you will have a perspective perhaps which is different to the other shared perspectives around the table, and you know, we know so much more now about the value of diversity. Absolutely. When it comes to, you know, decision making and you know, managing organisations and so forth. So exactly, it can actually be a real advantage.
And Lisa, I understand you have 2 beautiful children. Do you think parenthood has changed your management style or career ambitions?
One thing that parenthood has done for me is it's really helped me bring a little bit more empathy to work. I understand what a juggling act it can be at times, and how you have to sort of go with a little bit of the ebb and flow of family life and the needs of different members of the family. And I think it's important in a management context to have empathy that, you know, your team has that in terms of their day-to-day life too, and to not lose sight of it. And you just never know what's going on in someone else's life. Just having that empathy and I think coming from a place of assuming that people are doing their best, people, you know, as sort of coming from a place of good intent, is one that I've sort of learned.
And what about career ambitions? Has that changed you?
Or having kids in my life forced me to think about my career and to probably push me out of my comfort zone and to push me to get off that treadmill and to do some different things and to look much more broadly at what I was doing in my career, what I really wanted to do in my career. Did I want a career? Why did I want a career? So I have to thank them for sort of putting me on that aspect of my journey.
Lisa, there's a growing push in society for companies to have more proactive back-to-work policies for moms. So in your opinion, what kind of arrangements work best and what doesn't?
And having a one-size-fits-all approach is not optimal. You need to have flexibility where there's children and family lives involved. If you're in a large organisation, you need to have some clarity around what the company's policies are. You need to sort of have some clarity so that people know what the workplace expectations are, and so that people can make an assessment about, is that the right workplace for me? Is that an environment that I want to be in and that works for me? But you also, I think, do need those managers who have that empathy and a little bit of that flexibility. But I think the flexibility to support family and other aspects in people's lives is very important. And so if you're focusing on the outputs and the outcomes, I think that enables a little bit more of that flexibility.
How does PayPal tackle this back to work policies for mum?
Look, we have a lot of focus on sort of diversity and inclusion in the company. It's a sort of a deep part of our values, and we sort of have flexible working arrangements as well. We have policies where people can ask for flexibility. You know, even within my own team, I don't even like to be overly formal about it. I would say I'm much more concerned about outputs, outcomes and culture, and the team being a place that people want to be working in, really, and the rest flows in my experience. And I also think that, again, speaking for myself and also speaking in working with other women who have families, I mean, if you do provide that type of support and some of that flexibility, you're usually rewarded, you know, disproportionately. People appreciate that support and they want to give back in the same way. So you get a bit of a virtuous circle.
Lots of professional mothers feel guilty when making sacrifices.
Yeah.
How do you deal with this guilt?
I do think it's something that women don't have an exclusive license. We spend a lot of time in the family because we're a sort of a dual career family. My husband has a career as well. We kind of check in and like, you know, is this still the right thing for us to do, or are we all happy with this? And, you know, I think my daughter in particular, she's 16 now, and she's very sort of cognizant of those sorts of issues, and she's very much in the camp of, you know, I'd much rather see you out kind of doing stuff and being fulfilled within yourself than feeling like you're limited. And so maybe we don't spend as much time together as a family because we are sort of dual career parents, but we're nonetheless very connected, and we're very focused and very conscious about the quality of time that we have as a family, and you know, how we interact with each other as a family, and encouraging each other. Being in minority situations in the workplace, I think there is definitely a risk that you can allow a negative tape to start playing in your head around, but I don't believe it's something that you have to buy into, or you should allow yourself to buy into.
So you were a working mother while also studying for your MBA.
Oh yeah.
So I'm sure the audience would love to know, what kind of support structure do you have at home during that time?
When I had young children was to dial back my working hours for a time. So before they started school, so in that sort of 0 to 5 years, I made a conscious decision to just work part-time, so that I had more time with them. My husband has also at times reduced his working hours and done 4-day weeks and things like that to make sure that he's a very involved parent too. And so I know it sounds a bit ridiculous, like why would you work and do an MBA and have babies?
Exactly.
And on its face it doesn't sound good, I agree. But that was sort of the thinking, and that was how we made it work.
And what's the best advice you received when returning back to work after having your children?
And someone had said to me, if you're working 4 days a week, if that's your arrangement with your employer, you're basically finding yourself doing a full-time job, with a little bit of flexibility, of course, but you're only getting 80% pay. And that was good advice, and I definitely think that's the case. So I think if you're going to work part-time for a period because you want to do more outside of work, I would definitely sort of encourage someone to think about that, because I think you can end up sort of taking on more but not getting rewarded adequately for the work that you're doing if you've sort of got that 80% hours level. And I do think that sort of women getting a bit underpaid for what they do is a definite issue. And I think that's one of the ways in which that manifests but is not sort of so consciously kind of acknowledged, actually. So think about exactly what your terms are, and just ensuring that you're getting appropriately rewarded for the value you're contributing.
So when you were working for 4 days,
Yes.
you're still producing the same work?
Look, I think it's a trap that you can easily fall into. Yes, very, very much so. Because particularly in professional services like law and other consulting sort of gigs, you often have client-facing roles, and clients, in my experience, have generally been very understanding and supportive of those flexible arrangements.
And Lisa, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Since you're a
Okay.
lawyer, you
All right.
negotiate deals every day. Can you share some tips? Let's say when women, are in this situation, how they can negotiate with their employers.
Doing your homework and being clear that what you're thinking of proposing is an appropriate proposal. Usually it is, but I think just knowing the facts and knowing the marketplace, the company policies, etc. So definitely doing your homework is very important. I think that just making sure that from the day you sort of step in the door in an organisation, you're conscious of what your personal brand is, and making sure that you're developing that brand over time, so that when you're asking for something, whether it's flexibility or pay or whatever, you've already got that kind of established track record, or you're coming from a position of strength. You've got to be on your game all the time, I think. And then the last piece, I think, is just having the confidence to back yourself and to stand up for yourself, because sometimes, organisations can be very large, and it can be easy to fall through the cracks and, not get the pay increase or the job opportunity, or something that you seek as a next step in your career. So having the courage to ask and to have the right conversation with the right person in a influential, informed way. And I think the courage can be the hardest piece.
And Lisa, with a growing skill gap, how can female talent stay relevant in the workforce of tomorrow?
I think they're more than relevant today, because I think more than ever we understand what a drain on an economy it can be to educate half the workforce, but then not have them have fulfilling, enriching, productive careers for their working life. So I think it just makes good common sense apart from anything else.
So Lisa, Half the Sky is a career platform for women, and it connects women to better jobs at companies that care as well. So what do you think companies should do to attract and retain female talent?
I think being very consistent and focused on promoting messages around diversity and inclusion and the company's commitment to that outside the organisation as well as inside the organisation. Inside the organisation, you have to live that authentically. And that means, I think, promoting people who are practicing those values in terms of how they work day to day in an organisation. And I just think that's completely fundamental. If you don't have that, then it doesn't matter what message you're sort of portraying internally or externally. People are not going to hang around, and good people in particular are really not going to hang around. Living the message and making sure that, you know, the leaders and people who are sort of moving through their career, who are being promoted, that's really important to them, and that they continue to sort of have that sort of stewardship sort of sense of those considerations. I do also think that there's a role for training in an organisation, so you know, conscious inclusion training and things like that maybe companies haven't done as much of in the past but are doing more of now. I think those sorts of things are very important too, because sometimes you know, we all have unconscious biases actually, and that type of formal training can assist you and others in terms of understanding what sort of biases you might be bringing to different situations. So, yeah.
And Lisa, what are your thoughts on a platform like Half the Sky?
I think it's wonderful. Like, there are still big gaps that we need to cover, and I do sort of feel some sadness to think that we haven't made more progress in covering some of those gender-related gaps in the course of my own sort of, you know, career and time in the workforce so far. So I do think there is a role for more focused initiatives such as your platform. I really applaud it. And I think,
thank you,
particularly sort of ones like yours that sort of traverses not just the gender boundaries, but maybe some of the geographic boundaries as well. It's a wonderful initiative.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Lisa, for your time.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you.